Hey dreamers, welcome back to Bedtime Universe, where the night unfolds its secrets, one story at a time. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Drop it down below. I love seeing how our little galaxy of listeners keeps growing across time zones. Tonight's story is something different. Something that might just change the way you see the universe forever. So, lie back. Let your mind drift. On the 13th day of September in the year 2024, something entered our solar system that should not have been possible. The discovery came quietly, as most profound revelations do, through the patient vigilance of astronomers who spend their nights watching the darkness between stars. They noticed a movement, a disturbance in the cosmic stillness. Something traveling through space with a trajectory that originated from nowhere we had ever known. It came from the deep interstellar void, from the spaces between solar systems where light takes years to cross. The emptiness, where matter drifts in frozen silence, untouched by any sun's warmth for millions of years. They named it 3I, Atlas, the third confirmed visitor from beyond our stellar neighborhood. And with that designation came the weight of understanding that we were no longer looking at something that belonged to our family of planets and comets. This was an outsider, a wanderer from distant shores, carrying with it the dust and memory of star systems we could only imagine. The astronomers tracked its approach with instruments that could measure the faintest whisper of reflected light, following its path as it carved through the darkness with deliberate precision. But as the observations accumulated, as data points became trajectories and trajectories became patterns, something began to trouble those who studied it. The numbers refused to align with expectation. The calculations suggested an object between 5 and 46 kilometers across, a substantial mass, by any measure, large enough to be classified among the significant bodies that occasionally drift through our cosmic territory. Yet when they measured its gravitational influence, when they looked for the subtle tugging it should exert on nearby objects, they found almost nothing. The silence of its gravity was deafening. Scientists performed the calculations again and again, checking their instruments, questioning their methods, searching for errors that might explain the impossible data before them. An object of that size should possess considerable mass, should bend space around it in measurable ways, should leave its fingerprint in the fabric of reality through which it passed. But 3I Atlas moved through space like a ghost, like something that occupied volume without possessing substance, as if the universe had forgotten to fill it with matter when it was formed. The implications settled slowly into the minds of those who studied it, like cold water seeping through stone. If the gravitational measurements were accurate, if the size estimates were correct, then the density of this object was far below anything found in nature. Comets are icy and porous, yes, but even they maintain a coherent mass proportional to their volume. Asteroids are denser still, compressed by their own formation into solid bodies that carry weight appropriate to their dimensions. But 3I Atlas seemed to violate this fundamental principle, seemed to suggest that within its substantial form lay mostly emptiness, mostly void, mostly nothing at all. The word began to circulate through research centers and observatories, spoken first with hesitation, then with growing conviction. Hollow. The object might be hollow. Not partially hollow like a geode or a volcanic stone, but fundamentally hollow, as if its outer shell enclosed vast chambers of vacuum, as if it were a bubble drifting through space rather than a solid body. The implications of such a structure were profound, because nature does not commonly produce hollow objects of such scale. Gravity works to compress matter, to collapse structures inward, to create density and solidity. A hollow object of this size, formed naturally, would be extraordinary. A hollow object that maintained structural integrity across interstellar distances would be nearly miraculous. As 3I Atlas continued its journey through our solar system, astronomers plotted its course with increasing fascination and unease. It was approaching Mars, the red planet that hung in space like a rusty sentinel, and the opportunity for closer observation brought both excitement and trepidation. Here was a chance to study this enigmatic visitor with greater resolution, to perhaps understand the nature of its composition, to solve the riddle of its impossible lightness. Then, the object did something that transformed scientific curiosity into profound bewilderment. As it neared Mars, as it entered the gravitational influence of that ancient world, with its thin atmosphere and dead volcanoes, 3I Atlas began to slow down, not the gradual slowing of an object encountering resistance, not the expected behavior of a body subject to complex gravitational interactions, but a deceleration that seemed to contradict every principle of celestial mechanics. Objects approaching a planet accelerate as gravity pulls them forward, their velocity increasing as they fall down the invisible slope of curved spacetime. They do not slow down. They cannot slow down, not unless some force acts against their motion, some resistance or counter-thrust that opposes the natural flow of their trajectory. The scientists examined the data with mounting disbelief, running simulations, checking and rechecking their measurements, searching for explanations that might preserve the known laws of physics. Could there be atmospheric drag? Mars possessed only the thinnest wisp of atmosphere, nowhere near dense enough to slow an object of such size traveling at interstellar velocities. Could there be magnetic interactions? The models showed no mechanism by which such forces could account for the observed deceleration. Could there be gravitational perturbations from other bodies? The calculations demonstrated that no combination of natural gravitational effects could produce this result. One possibility emerged from the discussions, tentative and almost desperate in its reach for natural explanation. Perhaps the surface of 3I Atlas acted as a form of solar sail, its structure or composition reflecting light in such a way that photon pressure created a subtle drag against its motion. Light carries momentum, and though the force it exerts is vanishingly small, over vast distances and timescales, it can influence the trajectory of objects with extremely low mass. If 3I Atlas were indeed hollow, if its mass were as negligible as the gravitational measurements suggested, then perhaps solar radiation could indeed push against it, slowing its approach like wind filling a sail in reverse. The mathematics of this hypothesis were calculated with meticulous care. Yes, the scientists concluded, if the object possessed the right reflective properties, if its surface area were large and its mass small, if the geometry aligned in precise ways, then light pressure might account for some of the observed deceleration. But the numbers remained troubling. The magnitude of the effect seemed larger than solar pressure alone could explain, and the timing of the deceleration, its relationship to the object's position relative to Mars and the Sun, suggested something more complex than simple radiation pressure. Another possibility began to surface in quiet conversations and carefully worded papers. What if 3I Atlas were not merely passive, not simply responding to external forces, but actively maneuvering? What if it possessed some form of propulsion system, something that could generate thrust without producing the bright plumes and signatures we associate with rocket engines? An electromagnetic drive, perhaps using magnetic fields to interact with the sparse plasma that fills interplanetary space. An ion propulsion system, expelling charged particles at high velocity to generate tiny but continuous thrust. Such technologies existed in human spacecraft, devices that could operate for years, producing gentle but persistent acceleration or deceleration. But the energy requirements were staggering. Even the most efficient propulsion systems require power sources, and the sustained deceleration observed would demand enormous energy over extended periods. Where would such power come from? Solar panels could harvest light, yes, but the calculations suggested that covering the entire surface of the object would barely provide sufficient energy. Nuclear power sources might work, but they would add mass, contradicting the gravitational measurements. Unless the object was somehow more advanced, more efficient, utilizing energy conversion methods beyond our current understanding, the propulsion hypothesis seemed to create as many questions as it answered. As 3I, Atlas continued its journey, passing Mars and heading deeper into the inner solar system. Astronomers tracked its path with obsessive precision. The trajectory it followed was remarkable in its mathematical elegance. The object moved past Mars with exact timing, its approach and departure angles calculated to perfection. It then curved through space toward Venus, that shrouded world of crushing atmosphere and sulfuric clouds, approaching within observation range but never committing to orbit, never settling into gravitational embrace, always maintaining its independence and momentum. From Venus it arced outward again, moving through the inner solar system with the grace of a dancer performing a choreographed routine. It approached Jupiter, the great giant whose gravity dominates the outer reaches of our stellar family, whose massive presence deflects comets and shapes the architecture of the solar system through sheer gravitational authority. Here, if anywhere, the influence of natural forces should overwhelm any anomalous behavior, should impose order on the strange patterns observed in the inner system. But even near Jupiter, 3I, Atlas, maintained its peculiar characteristics. Its trajectory bending in ways that seemed calculated rather than chaotic, its speed adjusting with precision that suggested purpose rather than chance. The orbital mechanics specialists ran their simulations thousands of times, modeling every possible combination of gravitational assists and natural perturbations. The conclusion emerged, gradually, but with increasing certainty. The probability of such a trajectory, arising purely from natural forces, was vanishingly small. Not impossible, perhaps, but so improbable that alternative explanations demanded serious consideration. The path of 3I, Atlas, through our solar system appeared designed to maximize observation time, to linger near planets of interest, to sample different regions of space while remaining visible to our instruments. If one were planning a grand tour of our stellar neighborhood, a reconnaissance mission to gather data about the architecture and composition of an alien solar system, the trajectory would look very much like what 3I, Atlas, was executing. The thought settled uneasily into scientific discourse, unspoken at first, then whispered, then finally discussed openly in meetings and conferences. Between the equations and observations, in the quiet moments when data gave way to reflection, those who studied 3I Atlas began to confront a possibility that seemed to belong more to speculation than science. What if this object were not a natural formation at all? What if the hollow interior were not an accident of cosmic processes, but a deliberate construction? What if the strange deceleration were not an unexplained anomaly, but evidence of controlled flight? What if everything they were observing, the impossible mass, the calculated trajectory, the persistent anomalies, pointed toward a single, profound conclusion? The universe stretched around them in all directions, filled with hundreds of billions of galaxies, each containing hundreds of billions of stars, many surrounded by planets of their own. The mathematics of probability suggested that life should arise in countless locations, that intelligence should emerge on worlds scattered throughout the cosmos, like seeds in a vast garden. But the distances were so enormous, the timescales so extended, that contact between civilizations seemed nearly impossible. A species might flourish and fade in the time it took light to travel between neighboring stars. The universe might be filled with voices calling out to each other across gulfs of space and time so vast that the messages arrived long after the senders had fallen silent. Yet here was 3I, Atlas, an object that defied natural explanation, following a path that suggested intelligence and purpose. If it were indeed artificial, if some distant civilization had constructed it and sent it wandering through the galaxy, what might its purpose be? Was it a probe designed to visit solar systems and report back on what it found? Was it a monument, a marker, left to indicate that intelligence had once existed and achieved the capability to touch the stars? Was it a messenger, carrying information meant to be discovered by any civilization advanced enough to detect and study it? The questions multiplied faster than answers could emerge. If 3I, Atlas, were a probe, how did it navigate across interstellar distances? The nearest star systems were light years away, requiring centuries or millennia of travel, even at significant fractions of light speed. How did it maintain functionality across such timescales? What power sources could operate for thousands or millions of years? How did it survive impacts with interstellar dust and debris during its long journey? How did it know where to go? How to find solar systems worth investigating in the vast emptiness between stars? And if it were observing us now, studying our civilization as we studied it, what conclusions might it draw? What would our radio transmissions and spacecraft tell an alien intelligence about humanity? Would we appear primitive or sophisticated, peaceful or dangerous, worthy of contact or best left unnoticed? The thought created a strange inversion of perspective, transforming humans from observers into the observed, from scientists studying a specimen into specimens being examined by a far older and more advanced form of intelligence. The possibility also raised troubling questions about what 3I Atlas might represent. If it were artificial, the ability to construct something that could survive interstellar travel, that could maneuver with precision after journeying for countless years through the void, that could maintain structural integrity despite the low mass suggested by gravitational measurements. All of this pointed toward an engineering sophistication that dwarfed our own. What else might such a civilization have achieved? What technologies might they have developed? What understanding of physics and reality might they possess? Some among those who studied the object began to feel a peculiar emotion, something between awe and humility, wonder and unease. For all of human history, we had been the masters of our small corner of existence, the most advanced intelligence we knew of, the pinnacle of evolution on our world. We had split atoms and walked on the moon, decoded genetics and built machines that could think. But if 3I Atlas were indeed what it seemed to be, then somewhere in the galaxy there existed minds that made our achievements look like the first scratches of writing from ancient civilizations. We were not alone, and we were not the most capable. The universe contained others who had progressed far beyond our current state, who had achieved things we could barely imagine. As the observations continued, as telescopes tracked the slow movement of this enigmatic visitor across the cosmic stage, the scientific community found itself grappling with fundamental questions about the nature of discovery itself. How does one prove that something is artificial rather than natural? What criteria distinguish design from accident, purpose from coincidence? In our own solar system, we could approach objects, land on them, examine them directly with instruments and samples. But 3I Atlas remained distant, accessible only through light reflected from its surface, through gravitational effects so subtle they bordered on undetectable, through patterns of behavior that suggested but did not conclusively prove intelligence. The evidence remained circumstantial, each anomaly explainable in isolation, but together forming a pattern that became increasingly difficult to attribute to chance. The hollow structure might be a rare natural formation. The deceleration might result from exotic solar pressure effects. The precise trajectory might represent an unlikely but possible confluence of gravitational interactions. But all three together, combined with the object's origin in interstellar space, created a weight of implication that pressed against the boundaries of conventional explanation. Some scientists called for caution, warning against jumping to extraordinary conclusions based on limited data. They pointed out that history was filled with examples of mysterious phenomena that eventually received mundane explanations, that the human mind was prone to seeing patterns and purpose where only randomness existed. They advocated for patience, for gathering more observations, for waiting until the evidence became overwhelming before making claims that would reshape humanity's understanding of its place in the cosmos. Others argued that caution could be carried too far, that refusing to acknowledge the obvious in service of scientific conservatism was itself a form of bias. They pointed to the accumulated anomalies, to the mathematical improbability of the observed behaviors, to the lack of any truly satisfactory natural explanation. They suggested that sometimes the simplest explanation, even if extraordinary, deserved serious consideration when all conventional alternatives failed to account for the evidence. The debate played out in journals and conferences, in late-night discussions and carefully worded papers, each side marshalling data and arguments in support of their position. But beneath the scientific discourse ran a current of emotion, of hope and fear, of excitement and trepidation. The possibility that 3I Atlas might be artificial touched something deep in the human psyche, the ancient longing to know whether we were alone in the universe, whether other minds existed among the stars, whether the cosmos held any purpose or meaning beyond the mechanical grinding of physical law. Through it all, 3I Atlas continued its journey, indifferent to the attention it received, following its programmed or accidental path through our solar system with the patience of geological time. The sunlight gleamed off its surface, whatever that surface might be, creating a faint point of light that moved against the background of fixed stars. In telescopes, it appeared as barely more than a pixel, a tiny bright spot that refused to resolve into details, that kept its secrets locked behind distance and the limitations of human instruments. Astronomers calculated when it would leave, when its trajectory would carry it back out into interstellar space, away from the sun's warmth and light, back into the frozen darkness between stars. The window of observation would not last forever. Eventually, 3I Atlas would fade from view, becoming too distant and too faint to track, disappearing back into the cosmic ocean from which it had emerged. And humanity would be left with questions, with data that raised more mysteries than it solved, with the knowledge that something strange and wonderful had passed through our neighborhood and continued on its way. The philosophical implications extended in every direction like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. If 3I Atlas were artificial, it meant that somewhere in the vast expanse of space and time, intelligence had arisen and achieved technological sophistication. But it also meant that such civilizations might be rare, separated by distances so enormous that direct contact remained effectively impossible. The probe, if that was what it was, might have been traveling for millions of years, launched by a civilization that had long since vanished, its creators extinct before the first humans walked upright on Earth. This possibility carried its own form of melancholy, the thought that the universe might be filled with messages from the dead, with artifacts and probes sent out by civilizations that no longer existed, their voices calling into the void long after they had fallen silent. Intelligence might arise and flourish and fade in isolated pockets throughout the galaxy, each species reaching outward with hope and curiosity, sending their creations into the darkness in the desperate wish to be remembered, to leave some mark upon reality that would outlast their brief moment of existence. Or perhaps the civilization that created 3I, Atlas, still existed somewhere among the stars, continuing to evolve and develop across timescales that dwarfed human history. Perhaps they had sent out thousands or millions of probes, scattering them across the galaxy like seeds, waiting patiently for reports that might take millennia to arrive, if they arrived at all. Perhaps they had achieved some form of longevity or uploaded consciousness, transcending biological limitations, becoming something we could barely recognize as life. Perhaps they watched and waited, monitoring the development of younger civilizations, respecting some form of cosmic non-interference directive, or simply lacking interest in species that had not yet proven themselves worthy of contact. The uncertainty was maddening and magnificent in equal measure. Every answer spawned new questions. Every explanation opened new mysteries. This was the nature of profound discovery. The recognition that each step forward in knowledge revealed how much more remained unknown. For all of human scientific achievement, for all our mathematics and physics and chemistry, we remained fundamentally ignorant about the deeper questions of existence. We did not know how life began. We did not know if consciousness arose naturally from complexity or required something more. We did not know if intelligence inevitably led to technology or if other paths existed. We did not know if civilizations typically destroyed themselves or transcended their origins, or simply faded quietly away. 3I, Atlas, represented a test of our understanding, a challenge to our assumptions about how the universe worked and what was possible within it. If it were natural, then nature was more strange and wonderful than we had imagined, capable of creating structures and behaviors that mimicked intelligence and purpose without requiring any conscious design. If it were artificial, then the cosmos was less empty than it appeared, inhabited by minds that could reach across the light years, that could build things that endured beyond their creators, that could touch and perhaps even communicate with other intelligences, despite the vast distances that separated them. The scientists who studied 3I Atlas found themselves becoming philosophers despite their training, drawn into speculation about questions that transcended mere data and observation. What was the purpose of intelligence in a universe governed by entropy, where all order eventually dissolved into chaos, where even stars eventually burned out and galaxies faded into darkness? If conscious minds arose only to witness the slow heat death of reality, only to struggle briefly against the inevitable slide toward maximum entropy, what meaning could existence possibly hold? Yet, against that cosmic pessimism stood the fact of consciousness itself, the miracle of awareness, the ability of matter to organize itself into patterns that could observe and understand and create. Whether intelligence arose once or a billion times, whether it flourished briefly or endured across deep time, the mere fact that it existed at all seemed to suggest some form of meaning, some purpose embedded in the structure of reality itself. The universe had become aware of itself through minds like ours, through whatever minds might have created 3I, Atlas, and in that awareness lay a beauty that transcended the mechanical operation of physical law. As the object continued its silent journey through our solar system, moving with its strange combination of natural physics and impossible behavior, those who watched it began to experience a transformation in their thinking. The question of whether 3I, Atlas, was artificial or natural began to seem less important than what its existence implied about the cosmos itself. Whether created by intelligence or formed by chance, it represented a bridge between the known and unknown, a reminder that reality extended far beyond human experience and understanding. The universe was vast beyond comprehension, filled with phenomena we had never observed, processes we had never imagined, possibilities we had never considered. Every generation of scientists discovered that previous assumptions were incomplete or incorrect, that nature was more subtle and surprising than anticipated. The fact that 3I, Atlas, challenged our understanding of celestial mechanics and natural formation processes did not necessarily mean it was artificial. It might simply mean our understanding was insufficient, our models incomplete, our knowledge still fragmentary, despite centuries of observation and study. And yet, the pattern of anomalies, the precision of the trajectory, the hollow structure that defied natural explanation, all of it seemed to point towards something deliberate, something crafted, something that carried intention and purpose across the light years. The most parsimonious explanation, the hypothesis that best fit all the available data, was that 3I, Atlas, represented the work of intelligence, that somewhere in the galaxy, other minds had looked up at their night sky and wondered about the stars, had developed science and technology, had built machines capable of crossing interstellar space, and had sent this emissary into the cosmic ocean to explore and observe, and perhaps to make contact. If that were true, if 3I, Atlas, were indeed what it appeared to be, then its passage through our solar system marked a turning point in human history, as significant as the development of agriculture, or the invention of writing, or the dawn of the scientific revolution. It meant we were not alone. It meant the universe held other conscious minds, other perspectives, other ways of understanding reality. It meant that the great silence we had experienced, the apparent absence of signals or contact from extraterrestrial civilizations, might be ending. But it also meant confronting the reality of our own limitations and ignorance. If 3I, Atlas, were a probe built by an advanced civilization, then we were encountering technology far beyond our current capabilities, witnessing engineering that made our spacecraft look primitive by comparison. We were the younger species, the newcomers to the cosmic community, the civilization still learning the basic principles that others had long since mastered. The recognition was humbling, a reminder that for all our achievements, we remained at the beginning of our journey toward understanding the universe and our place within it. As weeks passed and 3I, Atlas, moved through its calculated or accidental arc, the object began its eventual departure, heading back toward the outer solar system and the interstellar medium beyond. Telescopes followed it as long as possible, gathering every scrap of data, recording every subtle change in velocity or orientation, hoping to capture some final revelation before it faded from view. But 3I, Atlas, kept its secrets, remaining enigmatic to the end, offering hints and implications but never definitive proof, never the smoking gun that would settle all debates and answer all questions. The astronomers and physicists, who had devoted months to studying it, found themselves experiencing a strange mixture of emotions as the object receded. There was disappointment, certainly, the recognition that they might never know the truth, that the mystery might remain unsolved for decades or centuries or forever. But there was also gratitude, a sense of privilege at having witnessed something extraordinary, at having been alive during the passage of this remarkable visitor, whatever its origin and nature might be. In the years that would follow, 3I, Atlas, would be studied and debated, modeled and theorized about, used as evidence for dozens of competing hypotheses. Some would argue it was definitely artificial, while others would insist on natural explanations not yet understood. Papers would be written and conferences held. Careers would be built and reputations made or destroyed based on interpretations of the data. The scientific process would continue its patient work, gradually accumulating knowledge, slowly building toward consensus, or at least toward better questions. But in the immediate aftermath of its passage, in the quiet reflection that followed the intensity of observation, Those who had witnessed 3I Atlas found themselves changed by the experience. They had seen something that challenged their understanding of what was possible, that pushed against the boundaries of known physics, that suggested the universe was stranger and more wonderful than conventional wisdom allowed. They had confronted the possibility, however uncertain, that humanity might not be alone, that other minds might exist among the stars, that consciousness might be not rare but common, not fragile but enduring. The mystery of 3I Atlas became a kind of meditation on the nature of knowledge itself, on the difference between what we can know and what we can prove, between understanding and certainty. In science, we build models of reality based on observation and mathematics, testing our theories against evidence, refining our understanding through careful experimentation. But some questions resist definitive answers. Some mysteries remain perpetually just beyond our grasp. Some phenomena straddle the boundary between the known and unknowable. Perhaps that was the true gift of 3I Atlas. Not the answer to whether we are alone in the universe, but the reminder that profound questions remain open, that reality still holds surprises, that the cosmos has not yet revealed all its secrets. In an age when it sometimes seemed that all the great discoveries had been made, that only details remained to be filled in, the passage of this enigmatic object through our solar system demonstrated that we still lived in a time of genuine mystery and wonder. The Hollow Wanderer, as some began to call it, had arrived from the depths of interstellar space and would return there, continuing its journey through the galaxy, indifferent to human speculation and interpretation. If it were a probe, it would carry with it data about our solar system, observations and measurements that might someday be studied by the minds that created it, analyzed, and compared with information from countless other star systems visited during its long voyage. If it were natural, it would simply drift on according to the laws of physics, another piece of cosmic debris following its trajectory through space and time. But for humanity, for the scientists who had tracked its passage and the philosophers who had contemplated its meaning, 3I Atlas represented something more than just an object or an anomaly. It became a symbol of possibility, a reminder that the universe extended far beyond our tiny corner of existence, that out there in the vast darkness between stars lay wonders we had not yet discovered and perhaps could not yet imagine. It challenged us to think bigger, to question more deeply, to remain open to explanations that seemed impossible until they became undeniable. The object also served as a mirror, reflecting back questions about ourselves and our own cosmic significance. If intelligence existed elsewhere, if conscious minds had arisen on other worlds around other stars, what distinguished us from them? Were we following a universal path of development, ascending through predictable stages from primitive awareness to technological sophistication? Or did each civilization find its own unique way forward, creating cultures and philosophies and understanding that reflected the particular conditions of their homeworld? Would we recognize alien intelligence if we encountered it? Or might it be so different from our own consciousness that we would fail to comprehend it as minds at all? These questions had been asked before, of course, debated by philosophers and scientists for generations, but 3I Atlas gave them new urgency and immediacy, transformed them from abstract speculation into practical consideration. The possibility of contact, however indirect, however uncertain, meant that these questions might have actual answers, that the philosophical musings of centuries might be resolved through observation and discovery, rather than remaining forever theoretical. As the light from 3I Atlas grew fainter, as its distance from the sun increased, and its tiny reflected gleam became harder to detect among the countless stars that filled the night sky, the astronomers who had followed its journey experienced a moment of profound connection to all those who had looked up at the heavens throughout human history. Ancient peoples had watched the stars and wondered about their nature, had tracked the movements of planets and comets, had created myths and stories to explain the lights that moved through the darkness. Medieval scholars had begun the work of mathematical astronomy, calculating orbits and predicting events with increasing precision. Modern scientists had built instruments of extraordinary sensitivity, had developed theories that explained the cosmos in terms of fundamental forces and particles. Yet despite all this progress, despite centuries of observation and discovery, the fundamental questions remained. What is the universe? How did it begin, and how will it end? Does it contain other life, other minds, other civilizations? Are we alone, or part of a greater cosmic community? Is consciousness rare or common, fragile or resilient? Do we have a purpose, or are we simply accidents of chemistry and evolution, brief sparks of awareness in an indifferent cosmos? 3I Atlas did not answer these questions definitively, but it transformed them from philosophical abstractions into urgent scientific inquiries. It suggested that the answers might be found not through pure reason or speculation, but through observation and evidence, through the patient accumulation of data and the careful analysis of phenomena. It demonstrated that the universe still held surprises, that our current understanding remained incomplete, that new discoveries awaited those willing to look with open minds and sophisticated instruments. In the final analysis, what 3I Atlas represented was a form of hope, the recognition that humanity's story was far from complete, that our greatest discoveries might still lie ahead, whether natural or artificial, whether accident or design. It had come to us from the depths of space, carrying the message that reality was larger and stranger than we had imagined, that the cosmos held depths we had not yet plumbed, that wonder and mystery remained possible in an age of scientific explanation. The universe stretched away in all directions, filled with galaxies beyond counting, stars beyond number, planets beyond imagination. Somewhere in that vast expanse, other worlds circled other suns, and perhaps on some of those worlds, other minds looked up at their own night sky and wondered about the lights they saw there. Perhaps they too had been visited by strange objects from interstellar space. Perhaps they too struggled to understand what such visitations might mean, what implications they held for questions of existence and meaning. And perhaps, somewhere in the depths of space, 3I Atlas continued its journey, moving from star to star, from solar system to solar system, carrying out its mission or following its random path, observing or simply existing, a hollow wanderer through the cosmic ocean, a mystery that touched the minds of those who witnessed it and moved on, leaving behind questions that would echo through the generations to come. The scientists would continue their work, gathering new data, refining their theories, building better instruments to probe the depths of space. Future observations might reveal new visitors from interstellar space, might detect signals or artifacts that would finally answer the question of whether we are alone. Or perhaps the silence would continue, the ambiguity would persist, and humanity would be left forever wondering about the nature of that strange object that passed through our solar system in the autumn of 2024. But something had changed in that moment of encounter, something subtle but profound. The universe had shown itself capable of surprise, had demonstrated that our understanding remained incomplete, had reminded us that certainty was an illusion and mystery was the natural state of existence. We had been given a gift, though we might never fully understand its nature or origin. The gift of wonder, the reminder that reality extended beyond our comprehension, that truth was larger than our theories, that consciousness existed within a cosmos far more magnificent and strange than our models could capture. The story of 3i, Atlas, would be told and retold, each generation interpreting it through the lens of their own understanding, their own hopes and fears, their own questions about existence and meaning. It would become part of human mythology, joining the other great mysteries that had captivated human imagination. The nature of consciousness, the origin of the universe, the possibility of life beyond Earth. And in that mythology, it would serve its purpose, whether intended or accidental, whether designed or random. It would remind humanity to look upward, to remain curious, to continue seeking answers to questions that might never be fully resolved. As the last observations were recorded, as 3i Atlas faded from view and began its long journey back into interstellar darkness, those who had witnessed its passage were left with a final, lingering thought. If the universe had ever chosen to speak to us, to send us a message about our place in the cosmic order, to remind us of how much we had yet to learn and discover, perhaps 3i, Atlas, was its first word. A word spoken not in language we could understand, not in signals we could decode, but in the language of anomaly and mystery, of behavior that challenged understanding and phenomena that resisted explanation. If the universe ever chose to speak to us, perhaps 3i, Atlas, was its first word, and that was tonight's journey through the unknown. If this story made you think, dream, or question what's really out there, let me know where you're listening from and what you felt in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep your notifications on, because next time we're going even deeper into the cosmic unknown. Until then, drift easy, dream big, and I'll see you in the next universe.